all things considered, the vaccine rollout has been a big success, with 72% of all adults in the UK having now had both jabs. But uptake amongst the under-30s is slow, so the government is taking action with the overnight announcement of kebabs for jabs. Yep, the government is working with companies like Uber and Deliveroo to offer things like taxi journeys and fast food as bribes to encourage the vaccine take-up. And I have to say, this follows a week of bullying. So in the week, we had the extraordinary speech from Michael Gove, when he said it's selfish if you don't get the jab, and we saw Dominic Raab and others basically saying that if you didn't have 2 jabs, maybe you shouldn't be able to go back to work. And I just sensed there was a bit of pushback against that going on. So now they've gone for bribery.
Well, I think it's better to have something positive. And we know that take-up has been really low amongst younger people, much lower than anticipated, particularly in some of the big cities like Birmingham, where I think it's about 42% of young people have had their first jab. So clearly something has to be done to try and encourage take-up. And if that means offering cheaper takeaways and a few free Uber journeys, then I'm not sure it's a wholly bad thing.
It sort of follows on from Joe Biden, doesn't it, Paul? Biden the day before was sort of saying, he hasn't got the power to do it because that power's at state level in America, but Biden suggesting that, $100 was offered for people to get the jab.
Yeah, the whole thing I think is a bit unseemly, the government attempting to coerce people with these sorts of bribes. I mean, I think there's a case to say, look, if somebody is in a particular job where it's necessary, in the health environment, for example.
So the care sector?
The care sector, where it's necessary for them to have the jab. I think that's legitimate for government to put its foot down and say, look, there are very specific reasons for this. But I think you draw a line, I think, with the normal daily functions. Going out, going to a nightclub, going to a football stadium, going to church, going shopping, and where the government is effectively trying to bully people into having a medical intervention. Don't forget, it's an important medical intervention, but it's still a medical intervention. I think you have to ask yourself the question, is this a step too far? And I think it probably is.
Yeah, you do. Also, I do begin to think that private companies, who say you've got to be double jabbed to come back to work, I wonder whether there's not a whole raft of anti-discrimination cases coming down the track against some of these firms. And I can see all sorts of minorities saying, for reasons of religious conscience or whatever it may be, I can't have this jab. And I just wonder, I wonder 2 things really. Number one, whether we've got, as I say, some big legal cases mounting on this. And number 2, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but when I saw Michael Gove speaking to us the way that he did this week, I wanted to throw a brick through the TV screen. I just thought, enough. We've had enough of
I figured that was just you when any Conservative politician comes on screen, to be honest, Nigel.
No, I like some Conservatives. I think I do.
I hope so, at least one.
No, I actually think we've reached the point where we've been so obedient. We really have stuck by the rules overwhelmingly for the last 18 months. And I think we've reached the point we don't want to be hecked by government anymore. And you've seen a big change of policy on universities.
Absolutely.
Because originally they were saying you'd have to be double jabbed to go back to uni in September, and now they're saying you won't. And I just wonder whether government has actually realised if they keep on pushing, that younger generation will start sticking 2 fingers up to them.
Well, I think we need to really as well look at the root causes of why young people aren't taking the vaccine. And I think one of the areas in which this is having an impact is social media and the kind of fake news agenda. I read an interesting report, mainly from the United States, actually, where there's this whole raft of kind of anti-vax stuff being spread on what look like very legitimate platforms and legitimate sort of Facebook pages. And so they were interviewing young people who said, oh, no, I'm not going to get it because I saw on Facebook that it gives you X, Y, or Z. I think that can be very dangerous.
I think that's part of it, but I think it's also a lot of young people probably just coming to their own conclusions that, do I really need this? Probably not. Now, whether or not they're right or wrong, I think that is the mentality of
I think they are right, aren't they?
Well, I think it's unusual, isn't it, for a country or for a government to say, look, we're recommending everybody has this jab, even though you may not necessarily personally be at risk from it. And if you look at the recovery rate among young people who get COVID, obviously it's extremely high. and the number of young people who have died with COVID without having any underlying medical condition is tiny. I mean, it's tragic for those who have died, but it's tiny. And I suspect that a lot of people are just thinking, look, we've jabbed the vulnerable, and that's right, but,
which is what they told us they would do. And now they're saying roll it out to school kids. A lot of people are arguing that we must vaccinate school kids. And isn't there an argument that for a 14-year-old, actually, there's probably more risk of a side effect of the vaccine than there is of getting seriously ill from the virus itself?
I think one of the points is also about the transmissibility, though, isn't it? Because there's growing evidence to suggest that the vaccination actually makes you less likely to pass on the virus even if you do get it. So I suppose that's an element that we also need to factor in these discussions.
But if we're reaching herd immunity, if, you know, and some scientists that whose work I've read say that basically we're a few months away from herd immunity and that most youngsters will have had it as it's spread around schools and colleges, do we really need to vaccinate them as well?
I think it's going to be very interesting the next time we have a flu epidemic. We have 17,000 deaths every year on average in England through flu. The next time we have a flu epidemic, it will be interesting if the government and others say, look, you know, of course flu is not COVID, they're different, but nonetheless there's some similarities. They're contagious respiratory illnesses.
So flu lockdowns?
So this is the thing. If they were consistent, they would probably have to argue for flu lockdowns, for social distancing, for masks, and possibly for young people to have the flu jab. What is it now? Just people over 40, I think, who get a letter from...
What about climate lockdowns? What about if we were to get an exceptional period of hot weather? And they were to say this could kill a lot of people. I mean, once you start this principle of locking the country down,
and you know the worrying thing, I think, I mean, there is a case for lockdowns. I'm not anti-lockdown for the sake of being anti-lockdown. I think in some cases it is necessary. I just think the mission creep on this has been very, very significant. The original case for the lockdown 16 months ago was squash the sombrero, stop the NHS from getting overwhelmed. We'll then try to get back to normal. Then it came about rolling out the vaccines. Then it became about eliminating the virus and developing herd immunity. And the danger is, I think, when you give governments these powers, they are very reluctant to relinquish them. That's the truth, and I think we're probably seeing a bit.
Very true. But one of the areas that I know is concerning a lot of people is with regards to travel and whether or not they're going to be able to go abroad.
Welcome to the GBNews YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.